What is up, my dashing dude and darling dames? I am the Haunts TV, and welcome back to the only subreddit that really proves you shouldn't mess with people. It's r/ProRevenge. First post for today comes from Mudman NASCAR 2020. Accuse me of stealing? You'll lose everything. This is my first post, so be kind. This happened way back in the dark ages, 1986. I was 21 at the time and working for a gas station that was associated with a certain grocery store chain in Washington state. It was owned by a company not affiliated with said chain, but had locations at nearly every one. As this was long before the days of debit cards, this was a cash-only gas station. We didn't even take credit cards. Customers would pull up, pump their gas, and then come to my window to pay. We also sold cigarettes. No drinks, no snacks. Customers couldn't even get into my booth. I had been working there about a year when the company announced it was closing the location. My manager and I were offered positions at another location upstate, and we both accepted. We moved our respective families and started our new jobs as new hires. Ugh. This station was incredibly busy. We did more business in 8 hours than my old location would do in a week. This location also had a different setup. Here, you would pull into the station from a single entrance, pump your gas, and then drive forward to a single exit where the Pay Here booth was located. There were always 2 cashiers on duty. Each cashier had a cash drawer. One thing I should note, there were also no computers, so closing the drawer down between shifts was time consuming and tedious. We had to manually count the cigarettes remaining and count the cash drawers. We would fill out an end of shift report listing the starting balances and the ending balances. We also had to list the gallons sold from each pump. At the end of the shift, the total of gallons sold and the total cigarettes sold should equal the cash balance. It is important to note here that not once in the year I had worked for the previous location, I had been off by more than 10 cents. The following morning after my first shift, I was informed by the manager that I was short $50. Impossible, I said. I balanced out yesterday. He said that I must have stolen that money after I completed the paperwork. I just looked at him and said, no, I didn't. He gave me a verbal warning and said that if it happened again, I would be fired, and the stolen money would be deducted from my paycheck this week. In the 5 days that followed, I realized quickly the manager was up to something. My old manager, who was just another working now, was also accused of stealing, as was one of the other new employees. I can't vouch for the other employee, but I'm pretty sure she did nothing wrong. The employees that had been there a while were never accused of anything. I did some checking and found out this manager was relatively new. Had only been there about 6 months, and the other cashiers had been here before him. Only new cashiers were being accused of stealing, and that location had been having stealing problems for about 6 months, and the turnover was high for new employees. I came to work at 6 a.m. on Monday, only to be told I was being fired for the manager accusing me of taking $500 out of my drawer the previous Friday. He said he only discovered it this morning, even though he had worked Saturday and Sunday. I said okay and left. I was pretty angry, and instead of going home, I parked in the grocery store parking lot and proceeded to settle in to watch the gas station. I knew that at 9 a.m. sharp he would take the cash in the safe and make the weekend deposit. At 9 a.m. he left the gas station and headed to the bank. But instead of walking into the bank, he walked into the Indian casino next door. It's not really a casino like we think of today, but more of a betting parlor for the races. It did have slot machines, but no card tables. I think, well, this is interesting. He comes out of the casino at exactly 10 a.m., walks next door to the bank, does his business, and then head back to the gas station. I head home with a plan. Every morning, I follow him from the gas station to the casino. I take a picture of him leaving, and one of him arriving at the bank and walking into the casino. I take pictures of him coming out and then heading to the bank. I do this for 5 days straight. He even went on Saturday. On day 3, my old manager was fired for stealing $150. I got the film developed. No digital camera in the dark ages. Note the times and dates on the back of each one. Then I call the main office of the gas company. It's after 5, but I'm hoping someone is there. And there is. I speak to a woman and explain my situation, and she says she knows exactly who I should speak to and transfers me. By some grace of God, she has transferred me to none other than the president/CEO of the company. I tell him my story and tell him I did not steal from his company and can prove who actually did it. He took down my information and said he would be in touch. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, right. The next morning, I went to the station to perform my usual observation of the manager. At 9 a.m., he leaves for the bank. At 10 a.m., he comes out. At that moment, two stern-looking gentlemen approach him. One pulls out his wallet and shows him something. The other one is talking. The manager goes pale and takes a step back. Next thing I know, he is being escorted to a car I hadn't noticed, and they drive off. I lose them at a traffic signal, so I head back to the station. They all show back up about 5 minutes later. And a few minutes after that, a police cruiser pulls in. The officer talks to the stern gentleman and proceeds to place the manager in handcuffs. The other man says nothing, but is glaring daggers at the manager. The president called me later that afternoon and informed me that the manager had been arrested for embezzlement. Turns out in that 6 months, he'd managed to steal about $5,000. So just to break in the story, because I got curious about this, I went to inflationcalculator.com, and $5,000 in 1986 is worth $11,871 in nowadays money. So this man stole a lot of money from people. And now back to the story. He would take the store cash into the casino and gamble with it. If he won, he would make the normal bank deposit. If he lost, he would make the deposit and note in his records that we had been short the previous day. The CEO had already been focusing on that location because of the stealing and high turnover rate. But my information helped him figure out what exactly had been going on. I was thanked and sent a substantial check as a reward. My old manager was offered the manager's job, and I was offered my old job back. I declined as I had already found another job that I liked more and paid better. The gambling manager was sentenced to 1 year in jail in order to attend counseling for his gambling addiction. His wife divorced him and took their 3 children to California. His house was foreclosed on and he ended up in a homeless shelter. Don't accuse me of stealing. I will get revenge. Out of every story that I have read in ProRevenge, this one is probably my favorite. Let me tell you why. Not only did this man stick to his guns and say, no, it wasn't me, he proved it. In a time when technology, you couldn't just go and say, hey, let me take a picture with my smartphone and let them know that, hey, this is how much was in my account, or this is how much was in my drawer, my bad. He literally went and he did research and he followed this man and saw him going to the casino, took pictures, date stamped them, and then got in contact with the CEO. And then after all that, he got fined with embezzlement, and then his wife left him and he ended up homeless. That is ProRevenge. Our next post for today comes from Bagley on Bass. Fired from last job, but I got the last laugh. Pardon the format, I'm on mobile. I worked at a retail chain that sold pet supplies and products. When I started working there, it was great. Family owned, and everyone I worked with was fantastic. The owners eventually wanted to retire and sold the small chain to an investment group. Once the investment group took over, almost all but a few employees were let go, forced out, or just quit. I hung on for a little while longer before I got promoted at my other job. New company brings in new manager to my store. My store was the top performing store in the entire chain, bringing in at about $10,000 to $12,000 per day on average. It was always more on weekends and especially around the holidays. The new manager is a Mr. Company man. Company told him they only want employees around for 2 to 3 years. Myself and 2 others had been there 10 plus years. So naturally, he began ruffling feathers and giving us all a hard time. Unfortunately, he decided on me first. Mr. Company Man found out that I worked 2 jobs. The 2 jobs are not in related fields, so there was no chance of any conflicts of interest on my end. However, my second job requires me to work nights and weekends. When Mr. Company Man found this out, he demanded I work nights/weekends there, so it was fair for everyone. I didn't work nights and weekends there because I was that store's only OSHA certified forklift operator, and deliveries didn't come at night. They came weekday mornings, every day. Mr. Company Man didn't want to hear that, and told me I either had to work nights and weekends or that day would be my last day. I told him, now don't threaten me with a good time. I suppose today is my last day then. I was pretty pissed about that, but it's not a big deal now. Ended up being the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I went home early, didn't finish my shift because fuck them. But when I got home, I decided to call my local OSHA inspector and report them for not having a certified operator on staff, as well as numerous other hazards. Needless to say, they lost close to 3 weeks profit from all the violations the inspector found. I was surprised they even showed up. In my state, the inspector will call you back after an inspection and tell you if your claims were founded or not. Mine were. And Mr. Company Man got his ass chewed out so bad he ended up quitting. Edit 1. Wow, I didn't really expect this to get really any attention. Thanks for the awards. To add a bit more, after I was fired, it really motivated me to get behind in gear and get back in school. Working as a stationary engineer now. Thanks everyone. Edit number 2. Wow, this really blew up. I am editing again to make a few clarifications. My state does not have a forklift license, it's really called a power lift operator's license. The license needs to be renewed every 4 years. There are 7 classes of power lift here. I was certified in 1 through 6. Class 7 being any lift equipped with pneumatic tires, which I would never have needed to use because ours was a class 5. There is no federal regulation, standard, or language that requires certification to my best knowledge. But my AHJs, authority having jurisdiction, are allowed to make regulations and standards that are more stringent than federal ones. These standards and regulations are typically enforced by my local Department of Labor office or OSHA office. Thanks all. Thank you for the story because that was absolutely fantastic. Again, it's not as hard hitting as the last one, but you still got the man to quit because you were like, you fired your only forklift operator. How you gonna do this? I don't know. Let's check in with OSHA. Our final post for today comes from the AJ Project. Relative loses everything because they were too stupid to keep their mouth shut. A bit of context here. I work as a lawyer for an excellent and famous law firm here in northern Italy. My family went through some tough times. In the last 9 years, we had to face a brutal divorce with my dad having depleted every single cent he could. One of my aunts was brutally demonetized because of a €150 cautionary deposit. My granddad was diagnosed with cancer and some other funny stuff in the middle. Because of that, our bonds became stronger and stronger. Must say that with my family, I mean my mother, her parents, and my 2 aunts, this year the demonetization virus managed to take away both my aunts. I loved them to the moon and back, but one of them was married to a complete douchebag. He always considered himself to be better and smarter than anyone else, and so were his relatives. My aunt and her husband, I straight up refused to call him uncle, lived in a huge house, and so did his brother with her wife and son. He died around 7 to 8 years ago and left almost everything he could just to his brother and his family, completely ignoring my family because OP's granddad is already rich. Why should I leave anything to his daughter and grandson? Basically, this year, my aunt was won by the demonetization virus. I was grieving, since I really loved her and cared about her, and I already lost another aunt prior. When the notary called us to read the will, both me and my mother came out completely astonished. She left us just a few things, even though she always said she would have left us basically everything. I don't really need the money involved that much, as I already inherited from my other aunt, and my job pays me really well, but my mom always had to struggle, financially speaking. It would have been a huge help, since she doesn't want anything from me. I tried to give her some money in the past, but she always sent them back, being stubborn as she can be. As we walked out, I pulled my cousin by my side just to ask him one thing. Hey, cousin, listen, I know it's a dumb question, but when I last saw her, I brought my aunt a little ceramic bell, shaped as a lady. She held it to her chest all the time. I'd like to have it back, it would be a memory of her. Him, smiling at me as if I was the most stupid person on earth. Yeah, sure, whatever. I don't know what I could do with that stupid bell, take it. But don't expect us to give you anything more. We had to sweat bullets for this will to work. I'm sorry, what do you mean? He realized he screwed up, so he just left. My mom went back home. I headed back to my office to take a closer look on my aunt's will. It was bulletproof, and the handwriting was, without any doubt, my aunt's. So what the hell did he mean? It took me several weeks to finally get the clue. As previously mentioned by my husband, it was just this small phrase. My aunt's husband died 7 years before. How the hell could he mention anything? Since zombies are still nowhere to be seen and I don't know of any deceased person talking from his grave, I started to scan the whole will once again. Things I never noticed became as clear as the sun. 1. There were missing pages. My aunt numbered them, but the 2nd and 4th pages were missing, with sentences left hanging there. Some of the corrections were legit, but looking closely, there were a few of them where the uncertain hand of an 81-year-old lady suddenly became stronger and more precise. 3. My aunt's husband was mentioned every time my aunt was talking about money and valuables. He did say something about the savings, but apparently his ties that were to be giving to charity did need his approval. Strange, huh? When I talked to my mom and her parents about this, my granddad, who is 74 and still has more strength and lucidity than your average 40-year-old dude, mentioned my aunt's husband's will. We don't know what he said. His family never let us even take a look at it, and it wasn't worth it to sue them. I went back to the notary the next day, asked to see the will. Since I was a relative, he let me, but asked what was going on. I simply said, "You'll know soon enough." When I read it, I started laughing so hard that even the secretary came to see what the heck was going on. I rushed back to my office and started to write everything down. Shit was about to hit the fan, but not for my family. After a few days, me, my mom, her parents, and my aunt's relatives met once again in front of the notary. I already told him what was happening. I could see him trying not to look disgusted as my aunt's husband's beloved ones walked in. Okay, we're all here. Apparently OP has some things to discuss with us concerning inheritances. You could hear a pin drop a mile away. I stood up and opened my bag. My family was smiling. My relatives were staring daggers from their eyes. As we all know, Auntie left everything to you. Nothing is wrong here as she didn't have any direct relationship with anything in this room. What is wrong is the reason behind it. I handed a copy of the will to everyone with some parts being highlighted. As you can see, pages are missing. Some corrections are different to say the least. But most importantly, my uncle is cited quite often. This led me to his will. At this point, my relatives turned whiter than snow. My cousin tried to stop me, telling me I couldn't possibly use my uncle's will, as more than 5 years passed. The notary told him that I totally could, as the allowance to contest a will is 10 years. He kept silent. He left my aunt everything he had, if she would have left it to you as she did. You see, in our state, it's not legal to make such a kind of contract. So I want to let you know that you just lost all your rights on my uncle's will, and you are all to be sued for false declaration in public deed and attempted fraud. They started screeching and screaming, calling me names and wishing me an obviously pleasant and late death, all because one of them wasn't clever enough to shut his mouth. Now they lost everything they had, since their farm, their money, their house, and their cars were all my uncle's. They had been forced to leave the house they were living in, all their bank accounts had been blocked, and even their farm had to be closed since it was also my uncle's previous activity. Since the corrections they made were actually very precise, and some items, jewelry, ingots, cash, are now mysteriously missing, they even have to pay for an equal value. They had a little empire, but managed to lose everything over greed and stupidity. Ladies and gentlemen, please listen to me. If you want to screw with someone, at least have the courtesy of not doing it with a lawyer. Yeah, honestly, I don't know how long they thought they were going to get away with that. This person obviously knows their family very well and knows what they would say and do in their will, because they talked to them. And whenever that didn't match up, they were immediately suspicious. And of course, someone's going to mess up and say something, especially a bratty, entitled person who thinks they just got everything. So yeah, they messed up. And good on you, lawyer, for getting your revenge. Well, alright, my dashing dudes and darling dames, that is going to do it for today's episode of r/ProRevenge. I hope you liked the stories, and if you did, I'm going to link them in the description as always. And if you liked the video, subscribe, share, drop a like, and a comment down below with what you'd like to see me read next. A humongous thank you to everyone who continues watching and subscribing to my channel. I cannot thank y'all enough for what y'all do for pushing out my channel. But with that being said, I'll see you in the next video.